So the Wall Street Journal is spreading Israeli propaganda and lies. So I'm here to refute that garbage.
After 15 months of war, Israel claims to have killed around 10,000 Hamas militants and much of the group's leadership.
Okay, those are lies. Putting aside the claims about the leadership, yes, Israel did kill a lot of Hamas's leadership, but they replaced those leaders. The claim about killing thousands of Hamas militants, that's a lie because no one knows how many militants were killed. What we know is that Israel has been committing genocide and killed thousands of civilians. We'll never know exactly how many civilians they murdered, but Israel does not make a distinction between the Gazan population and Hamas militants. So they just murder everyone, including children, and they just pulled a number out of their ass. So that's a lie. Don't platform lies and assertions like that because when you do it, you are lying for them.
But that isn't the image Hamas has been trying to portray.
There's a lot of psychological warfare going on between the two sides.
With the first stage of the Gaza ceasefire coming to an end, the Wall Street Journal examined videos of Hamas's hostage releases to find out how the group used them to try and show it is still in control of Gaza.
It is still in control of Gaza. I also find it interesting that woman's name is Anat. That's going to become important in a little bit. We'll talk about how the media lies for Israel and Jewish supremacy.
Under the terms of the ceasefire agreement, Hamas has released small groups of hostages over a 6-week period.
Also, this is great how they're showing all these videos because you can see how well treated they are. That's not propaganda, that's just factual reality. Hamas treated those hostages humanely. Compare them to the hostages that Israel kidnapped, and they kidnapped thousands of Palestinian people. And these people are tortured and starved to death.
In what Israel described as ceremonies designed to humiliate.
They're brought on stage and...
No, you idiots. They're not humiliating them. You can see just how well treated they are. Okay? Yes, they're smiling. Are the smiles staged? Are they fake? I don't know. But what we do know is that the other hostages that were released did give statements to the media when before Israel could censor them and basically put them on house arrest. They were talking about how well they were treated, how humanely treated they were. In fact, at least one of the former hostages actually protested against the government and their genocide later on.
Made to smile, sometimes to speak and give speeches which are staged.
Oh man, talking about staging things. You know, I'm not even gonna waste any more time on this. I'm going to show you. We're gonna look it up right now. Anat Schwartz. Guess what Anat Schwartz did? Anat. Guess what Anat Schwartz did? She lied. She lied for Israel. She was quote unquote working at the New York Times. She had no background in journalism at all. And you can read this entire article. She had no background in journalism at all. She was an Israeli Air Force intelligence officer. So she was hired by a Jewish Zionist that worked at the New York Times just because she was an Israeli intelligence officer, just because she was a Jew. And she wrote an article called Screams Without Words in the New York Times, which falsely asserted that there was mass rape that happened on October 7th. That's what Anat Schwartz did. This is objective reality. You want to talk about propaganda? This is what Jewish supremacist controlled media in the West does, which includes the Wall Street Journal, but it's also the New York Times, the Washington Post, and especially CNN, whose parent company, Discovery, is the CEO of that is David Zaslav. David Zaslav. He's a Jew. And he's the president of the parent company of CNN, Warner Brothers Discovery. He's a Jew, and his hero is Menachem Begin. Who's Menachem Begin? Let's look it up. Let's look it up in real time. Menachem Begin. Some people like to call him Menahem Begin. I like to call him Menachem Begin because this guy's a piece of fucking shit. He's a Jewish terrorist. Okay? This piece of shit bombed the King David Hotel, which killed over 90 people. He's a murderer. And you know what Israel did? They turned this guy into the sixth prime minister of Israel. The first terrorist attacks were conducted by Jews. Okay, he was part of the Jewish terrorist organization Irgun, and he murdered over 90 people. The King David Hotel was a British target. Look, the King David Hotel bombing. He's the one responsible for this. Let's watch more about their take on Hamas's propaganda. What hypocrites.
Hamas has been trying to maximize the influence that it can draw upon and spread through symbolic messaging.
This messaging even came down to some of the locations Hamas has staged its handovers at across the Gaza Strip.
Hamas is trying to demonstrate that it continues to exert influence and a physical capability across different parts of the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, because they haven't been defeated, you idiot. That's the point. They are still in control of Gaza. Israel did not defeat Hamas. That's just the truth.
As the weeks passed, the ceremonies became more and more choreographed. Take the hostage release on January 25th.
Was it more choreographed than the lies about mass rape on October 7th that were written by Anat Schwartz, who's a Jew, who's a Jewish supremacist, that was hired by another Jewish supremacist and a Zionist that worked at the New York Times. And if we don't know who this person was, and this is the one that we caught. So we know that this is something that is widespread that's going on at the New York Times and obviously at all these other things, whether it's the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, all of it. The New York Post isn't even trying to hide their Jewish supremacy anymore. They're all controlled by Jewish supremacists.
The 4 women freed were escorted onto a stage, decked out with a background bearing the seal of Hamas's armed wing. Just 3 weeks later, on February 15th, the setup was even more curated. This time it took place in Han Yunis, in front of the destroyed home of Yahya Sinwar, the militant group's late leader who orchestrated the October 7, 2023 attack, was killed by Israel last fall.
Yeah, he was killed fighting on the ground, okay? He wasn't assassinated. He was fighting for his people. You know, say what you want about him, but that takes courage. What political leader in modern times ever does that?
A poster to the left of the stage seemingly depicted Sinwar looking out through the shattered wall of the room where he was killed.
It's a nod to Sinwar and his role in Gaza. In exchange for the release of the Israeli hostages, there have been hundreds of Palestinian detainees and prisoners that have been released from the Israeli.
And look at how emaciated these people are. Look at how thin they are. They've been starved to death. Many of them were tortured. Probably all of them were tortured.
Israeli side, and this was part of Sinwar's original plan.
Why doesn't this woman condemn Israel for starving those Palestinian prisoners? Is it because she's a Jewish supremacist herself? Yeah, I think so.
Plan.
The handover of 4 dead hostages, including an Israeli mother and her 2 young children, saw coffins displayed on stage.
Yeah, those people were killed by Israel, by the IDF, because they were bombing and killing recklessly. Okay, that's the reason why they died. But the Wall Street Journal isn't blaming the IDF for those murders. Okay, Hamas didn't kill them. It was the IDF. They're leaving out that critical detail. So they're spreading all this propaganda by lying by omission.
Anna depicted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as a vampire, apparently blaming him for the hostages' deaths.
He is responsible for their deaths. Those hostages would have never been released in the first place if it weren't for Trump. Okay, the reason why there was never a hostage exchange aside from the initial temporary ceasefire that happened very early in the genocide was because the Jewish supremacists in Joe Biden's cabinet, the Jews, including Anthony Blinken, but also Jacob Sullivan, uh, Jake, yeah, Jacob Sullivan. He goes by the name Jake Sullivan, so people don't know that he's a Jew. Uh, but they supported the genocide. They supported Jews raping and killing children in Gaza, and they just wanted it to continue. And they just did fluff lies to the media to conceal that. But they supported it because Biden is senile. So he wasn't really in control. He was just a puppet for these Jewish supremacists that were in his cabinet. And that's the biggest difference between Trump and Joe Biden's cabinet. A lot of people say that Trump's cabinet is filled with Zionists, but none of these people are Jews. Joe Biden's cabinet was filled with Jews. And that Jewish representation was reflected in Joe Biden's policy towards Gaza, and specifically Israel, which was to give lip service to the media, to pretend like they wanted the hostages released and the genocide to stop. They didn't. They secretly wanted it to continue. And so they didn't exert any pressure on Netanyahu to stop it. Only Trump did. So credit where credit's due. Trump was the reason why those hostages were released, not because of Joe Biden or his miserable Jewish supremacist cabinet.
I think these ceremonies have been quite shocking to the Israeli public. It was very humiliating. There were anti-Israeli chants with these coffins, and they really were upset about that.
Oh, gee, I wonder why they hate Israelis. Maybe because they've been raping and killing their people? You think that has something to do with it?
In earlier handovers, Hamas used crowds of people and close-up camera angles to try and appear to look numerically strong. However, other images of the same event, shot on a wider lens, show how condensed the crowd was.
Hamas has used these ceremonies of freeing the hostages to basically make a show of force, to show that it is still in command, it's in control, and it has military force.
But they do. Like, I mean, I don't really care about the cropping of the photos to make it look like it's bigger than it really is. I mean, it was still a big crowd. Who knows? Who cares? The point is that they are still in control of Gaza, not the IDF, not anyone else.
It's also used it as a chance to humiliate Israel and show that Israel has failed in its war goal to
They did. They did fail in its war goal. They are humiliated.
destroy Hamas.
The militant group has also used props, symbols, and even goodie bags for the hostages throughout the handovers.
Hamas has tried to make the ceremony look official with the certificates.
What, you think it's not official just because they're Hamas? Hamas is the government of Gaza. They're the elected government of Gaza. You're just calling them terrorists over and over and over again. I made a whole video talking about how Israel created and funded Hamas. You know, you see the spin that these people are doing. And by the way, Israel funds and supports ISIS and Al Qaeda. It's just a fact. Look at who controls Syria right now. It's Al Jolani. I made a whole video about this. He's an ISIS terrorist. Okay, Israel supports far right Islamic extremist terrorism. Why? Well, because their origins are in terrorism. Okay? That's the reason why.
With the signing of the release papers and the stamp. So when you think about the ultimate objective of Hamas, which is the creation of a Palestinian state, it seeks to act.
Is that so bad? See, the people who oppose the creation of a Palestinian state are Jewish supremacists like her. They're the only ones.
And be like a state.
But analysts say on the global stage, this may have had a different effect.
They've created a spectacle out of their release, and this is a violation of sort of human dignity, which is enshrined.
Oh, you know what is a violation of human rights? Raping and murdering children. That's what's a violation of human rights, you idiot. Human dignity. No, you complain about how Israel, Jews, raped and murdered Palestinians. This is the reason why people hate Jews so much these days. It's because Jews have been raping and killing kids, and the Jews in Israel have been celebrating that. That's the reason why they hate them so much. But you never ever want to talk about Jews when they do bad things. And that's despicable. That's advancing Jewish supremacy. When you only talk about Jews when they do good things or when they're innocent or when they're oppressed, it gives the unconscious subliminal impression that Jews can only ever be those things. They can only ever be innocent, victims, or oppressed. But when you never talk about them doing bad things, like when Jews rape and kill kids, it gives the impression that they can't ever do these things, that they necessarily are always innocent. And that's a lie, and that's Jewish supremacy.
As a principle in international humanitarian law.
All the ceremonies are just seen as super distasteful. The
Humanitarian
goodie
law.
bags were
What a
seen
joke.
as pretty horrible.
Israel has also added some of its own symbolism by issuing Palestinian prisoners being exchanged for hostages with t-shirts bearing slogans like, "We neither forget nor forgive."
It's gotten out some criticism in Israel. Some people see it as, sinking down to Hamas's level, but
No, Israel has not sunk down to Hamas's level because Israel has done far, far worse with the genocide, with the rape and the murder of children. And before October 7th happened, they were shooting and murdering journalists. You know, they were killing civilians, including in the West Bank, which they're ramping up now. And the state protects Jewish settlers, they call them settlers, they're illegal immigrants, in the West Bank, stealing land and then murdering Palestinians in the West Bank. That was happening before October 7th, and it's happening even more now.
I think both sides want to show the other one that they're stronger and they're in control.
Security experts believe while Hamas's propaganda displays are mainly aimed at Palestinians, they also hope to target the international community, potentially as a tool to recruit new members or sympathizers abroad.
What these types of symbolic public displays, as well as visual propaganda tools, offer is asymmetric leverage. And Hamas is very keen to be able to explore.
And you're using asymmetric leverage in the opposite direction because you, Jewish supremacists, do have control of Western media. I already talked about that. In fact, I'm going to talk about that more right now. Look at this. So they were talking about Nama Levy. Nama Levy was one of the hostages. Some people call them prisoners of war because she was a soldier. And she was used as a propaganda tool by Jewish supremacist controlled Western media to lie about mass rape on October 7th. So let's watch this video. Refresh our memories.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
Okay, so millions of people watched this video, and it led to the Western media falsely asserting that Nama Levy was raped. Okay, so that woman, and it was a disturbing video when we all first saw it, right? Because you can see the seat of her pants is bloody, and then they used that to assume that she was raped. Guess what? She was not raped. So even the Wikipedia article on Nama Levy is terrible. So you can see here, footage showed Levy with multiple visible injuries and a large bloodstain on the seat of her gray sweatpants, which gave rise to widespread speculation that she had been sexually abused. Images from the footage have come to symbolize sexual violence. And it repeats this lie over and over again. Now, in all fairness, it's saying widespread speculation that she had been sexually abused. But the implication of that is that she was raped. Like the article is implicitly asserting that she was raped. Nama Levy was not raped. So even people in the talk section are using clever language to manipulate people into thinking that she was raped. This person here, the language did not reflect this. I had to do so, but there's nothing wrong with citing what is a description of fact, namely that such speculation exists. Why are you platforming speculation that she was raped when she wasn't raped? Okay, because if she had been raped, so this is Nama Levy here. If she had been raped, it would have been obvious by now. She would have told people. She would have gone public and asserted it. Okay, so it was pretty clear that she had not been raped. So the blood stain on the seat of her pants just came from blood that she was sitting on. Okay, and that's it. but she had not been raped. If she had been raped after she was released, and this article even talks about her being released, if she had been raped, she would have said so after she was released, and she wouldn't have been so happy, smiling, and in good health when she was released. These are lies. These were lies that were created by Anat Schwartz and other Jewish supremacists in the media. They lied. Okay, if she had been raped, she would have said so, but she didn't. And the Wall Street Journal is talking about propaganda and lies. What a joke. Why didn't they ever set the record straight? Why doesn't this article make it clear? Okay, it could say that there's speculation that she be sexually abused. Why doesn't it make it clear that she wasn't raped? Why doesn't someone edit this and say that she actually had not been raped? No, they'll never do that because they want people to believe that she was raped. She wasn't raped. You want me to say that one more time? Nama Levy was not raped.
Exploit this because as they release,
And it pisses me off. I gotta say one more thing. I made a video talking about how Nama Levy wasn't raped. And guess what happened? YouTube took it down because they said I was supporting terrorism. The censorship that Jewish supremacists exert on social media, including YouTube, is despicable. We have the right to free speech and we have the right to state objective facts like how Nama Levy was not raped. Okay, stating an objective fact is not supporting terrorism. Hamas is not even a terrorist group. They're freedom fighters who are fighting for their people. They're doing what any responsible government would do for their people, which is to fight for the liberation of them when their people are being raped and murdered by Jews. Okay, and if that makes you feel uncomfortable, what should make you feel more uncomfortable is the fact that Jews are raping and killing kids in Gaza. That should make you feel infinitely more uncomfortable. Sick and tired of these lies.
Israeli civilian hostages, they are losing that leverage. That is withering away. And this is not lost upon the organization.
So they're saying that Hamas is losing leverage because they're releasing hostages. So what do you want them to do? Not release the hostages? Like that argument just means it's so stupid. Okay? So then what do you want them to do? Hold on to the hostages, you idiot?
Or its external supporters.
With negotiations yet to begin for the second phase of the ceasefire, families of the hostages who still remain in Gaza are also watching.
Some message.
Well, I mean, if they're watching the Wall Street Journal's video on this, then I mean the message is that maybe Hamas should hold on to the hostages because they're losing leverage, apparently, according to that Jewish supremacist.
Are aimed specifically in Israel, and we know that because some of the signs they print are in Hebrew specifically, and are taunting army units or Netanyahu. So a lot of it, I think, is for the Israeli public to make them feel like they need to pressure more to get these hostages free, but it's also a show of force for everyone. It's kind of this orchestrated moment that's televised all over the world, and it's a chance to show their force.
Yeah, posting stuff in Hebrew. I'm just going to throw this out there for good measure. Hebrew was a dead language. Hebrew was a dead language until a Zionist named Eliezer Ben Yehuda, this guy, you can see right here, known for reviving the Hebrew language. It was a dead language until this guy revived it in the late 1800s. He was a Zionist that advocated for the stealing of land that didn't belong to him. Okay, so the Middle East, land in the Middle East, whether it's Palestine or anywhere else, does not belong to white Jews from Europe. White Jews, Ashkenazis, and other white Jews, because Ashkenazis are not the only white Jews. They're not Semitic people. Actually, the native language of Ashkenazis is Yiddish, which is a Germanic language. Hebrew, which is a Semitic language, was a dead language before this guy. And it only happened in the late 1800s. And it was even opposed by Theodore Herschel, who is the founder of Zionism. He thought that that was a bad idea. When Eliezer ben Yehuda revived Hebrew, he had to steal words from Arabic to modernize Hebrew. Because before him, Hebrew was only used in religious ceremonies, and that's it. Which is not uncommon. There's other religions that speak in ancient dead languages, like Buddhism. They chant in Parle, which is the language of Buddha. But it's a long dead language. No Buddhist, whether it's Sri Lankan Buddhist or Tibetan Buddhist, whatever, no one speaks Parle. They Sri Lankan Buddhists speak Sinhalese, but when they chant in the ancient language of Buddha, which was Parle, and that's what happened in Judaism. They would only speak Hebrew in these religious ceremonies, chanting, praying, whatever it is, but they didn't speak it in everyday conversation. So that's why we know that uh, white Jews, Ashkenazis, are not Semitic people. They're Germanic people, if anything. Anyway, that's all I got to say. We got to stop the propaganda from Jewish supremacists, and we all got to do our part. So I'm doing my little part. It's not much, but it's something. See you guys later.